All right, welcome to episode one of the Survive the 6.5. Just get open up with some disclaimers here. Obviously, these are just thoughts and opinions of the people on the podcast, of myself and the two guests today. Um, yes, we're going to open up a conversation. I got Patrick Kervin and Andrew Dunham, two guys I used to work with for a long time, two guys I got a lot of respect for, and I got a deep friendship for. Do you guys want to go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Hey, my name's Pat. I work as a supervisor and doing some other tasks with a municipal agency. I worked with Kyle over my mixed 6 year career on commercial services, and in between there, working a really rural agency, like 220 square miles of coverage while I was going through paramedic school. But I'm still in the job and I'm still pretty well enjoying it after being in for about 12 years.
My name's Andrew Dunham. I also worked for quite a while with Kyle at a commercial agency where I was a supervisor of a station with Patrick over here. I put in grand total between volunteer experience and commercial and a staffing company about 13 years total, and I've been out for about two.
What do you do now?
I build fire training props for fire departments across the world.
Cool.
Oh, dude, I didn't even know that. That actually sounds pretty dope.
Yeah, it's a good gig, and it's a good niche for somebody who got out of the field but still kind of wanted to keep their toes in.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I feel that sometimes. Like, I got completely out, and I decided the only way to get my toes back in is to get a master's degree. So I think I went the hard way.
A
But
master's degree in ambulance driving?
right, I think we all got that. I got we.
Maybe.
I guess one of the interesting thing is here. Well, we got myself who got out. I guess I can introduce myself too in a way. I think, God, I didn't done the math here, but between volley and career, it's over a decade. Um, like I said, I worked with both of you guys in the capital region, and I got out. What maybe 3 years ago, I think it was, or 2 years ago, somewhere around there, and um, now I work in sanitation, but I'm working on a master's degree in social work to hopefully work with first responders and stuff that deal with mental health issues, and that's kind of the whole basis of this podcast here. Is we're going to kind of talk about you know mental health issues that were related with the job, how either where we worked helped us or hurt us or whatever, and that's the interesting part. Is I got two guys here that one guy that's made like an old person career out of it with you, Kervin. You're still there and you're gonna be there till the day you die probably, and then Dunham, who you got out and you're doing something else, and I guess we'll just kind of talk about like we'll do the easier of the two subjects of like what kept you in, Pat. Like what did you do self care wise, or what did your employers do that kept you in the job rather than walking away from it?
Well, you know what they say, gaslight gatekeep girl boss. Um, there's. Well, for one, there was a big pivotal moment for me. I can tell you when I stopped sleeping well. It's the day I got a phone call to go check on one of my best friends, and, I'd asked this girl how she was going to do it. Um, Told her what kind of bad shape I was in while I was in paramedic school, and we became friends right off the bat, man. We were like soulmates. And she took her own life in 2019,
Mm-hmm.
and I got a phone call to go check on her. And I sent another friend to go and uh, check themselves, and it took them about as much time as it would have taken me to check, but I knew what I was going to walk into, and he found her. And then I had to deal with a lot of the follow up and the follow through and the messes that go with that. Um, and after all the stress of that whole ordeal, the loss of somebody who I held so close to me, going through all those affairs, getting out of a domestically abusive relationship, um, my mental health kept declining until my friend who's sitting here with us stopped by my house and said, "Yeah, when we go in inpatient." And I wound up in inpatient psych care, and that's a much longer story for a different day. Um, and that's a large part of what changed the way I approach things. I realized that there was underlying stuff. I realized that I'd gone far enough that I was a danger to myself or other people.
Mm.
And I realized that if I didn't start finding some kind of balance between my work and my state of being, that I was not going to be here very long to enjoy anything at all.
Yeah, well,
And
dude,
so,
that's kind of interesting because um, I kind of have the same story with you.
isn't that messed up, man?
Yeah, yeah.
And it, all things being said, I switched agencies. I went to work for a different place, and that was great and interesting. And we've run into some trouble more recently with the way that I feel about what's going on. But what I learned was that taking care of your own needs that you might see as wants when you're having them, but they're really needs, should come first in taking care of your career. There's a reason the first chapter of the textbook is care of the first responder.
Yeah, but we just throw that right out. We gotta hurry up and get to chapter 2, which is scene safety and BSI.
Well, yeah, and if you don't clap and say those things before you start the skills assessment, you're going to fail and die, and your mother will hate you. So,
Well, that's kind of the funny thing of is and we'll get to you, Andrew. Don't worry, I promise. But like we're so when you go through EMT school and then you go through paramedic school and all that, it's like scene safety PSI, scene safety PSI. And they drill it in your head of like, don't be in a situation that can get you hurt or in trouble. You know, like don't go in if the guy has a gun, or make sure you wear your BSI, which gloves, mask, whatever is needed at the time, so you don't get sick and all that. But like, there really isn't like a before every call or after every shift. Like, what's going on in the most important part of your body, which is in your head, your brain, and there really isn't much of a discussion around it. I know when I got in, and Dunham got in before me, I'm pretty sure, and you can kind of reflect on this, is like there was still a lot of old heads around that you don't talk about stuff, you kind of brush it off, you just make jokes about it. And substance use was a great way to get through stuff, but compartmentalization, it was like massive, and you really just had to have thick skin and be the tough guy. You don't want to be soft or whatever.
There was a lot of that mentality going around still when I came in to it as a career. Because like you said, a lot of those guys were like, they were the old guard. They were the guys that have been, at the same place doing the same thing for 25, 30 years. And they'd seen it, they'd been there, they'd done it, and they didn't want to hear about if you were having problems with it. They just wanted you to run the next call.
Well, that was the most important part, is like, well, you got to get going to the next call. It didn't matter like what, what the nature of the call you were just on was. You had to like get up and go to the next call, and to a certain part, you kind of prided yourself on that. It was like, yeah, nothing really affects me. But then, like,
until it does.
Right. And then you find yourself inpatient or in a rehab, or, unfortunately, we all know handfuls of really close people that have taken their life, and stuff like that. And I think it's important to get a conversation going. Before we get too deep, though, talk about yourself a little bit there, Dunham.
So I came into EMS 2008 at a volunteer agency. I did some volunteer time at that agency before hopping over to another EMS agency, where out of that agency I was recruited by a supervisor that we all had at the commercial agency we all worked for. And I came over to work for that commercial agency. And that commercial agency was a unique experience. I got out because I had just had a young son. There was issues going on between me and my son's mother that directly correlated to some of the things that I had seen and done and whatnot throughout my EMS career. And I decided the best thing for myself and my family was to take a step back and remove the source of negative stimuli that I was receiving that was causing some of the mental health issues I was experiencing.
Mm-hmm. So how How long ago did you get out, Dunham? Was it 2 years ago? You said.
2021.
So we were right around the same time that we kind of stopped, kind of doing our thing. Um, I got out and went back in, like for a second helping, and that second helping was one of the worst experiences. Like just drilling myself as much as I could, working as many hours as I could. And Kervin, I don't know if you were you with us at that um, time when there was just like when people were getting mandated to 36s and shit like that. Like you were coming in for a
I was
12 and you'd be
I
stuck there
was
for
one of the
3 days.
canaries out of the cage before that started.
Yeah, because that was, dude, that was arguably one of the wildest times of my
I
career.
left before you came back because I could not believe that you were rehired.
I couldn't believe it either. um,
And that time period was really bad for everyone.
well, that was like what? That was got to be like 2015 ish area,
No,
2016.
no, that was much later. That was in the 2020s, man.
What?
Oh wait, which thing?
The first round of the 36, because in 20,
Oh yeah, that was around 2015.
in 2020 they had put in the policy, or in 2019 they had put in the policy that you couldn't work more than 24 hours.
Right.
Yeah, you would get mandated
Um,
to it. You'd come in for like a 12-hour night shift,
No,
and
I
then
went
have
back in
12
16,
hours
so
off
they
and then
just
12
got done
back
with the
on, and
36 thing in 15.
they'd hammer you with a 12 between because somebody called out or they didn't schedule anybody, and
Or you weren't smart enough to run across the street to your car and crack a beer in the trunk with your undershirt on. Yeah.
right. I remember that like there's people that work at like even I got stuck in that and the issue is that it like you worked at 36 and it was a negative cycle because you'd get mandated to that 36 instead of working a 12-hour shift, and then you'd say like screw it, I'm calling out for my next shift. So then Dunham is stuck getting mandated because I called out, but then he decides, you know what, screw it, I'm calling out, and then you get stuck, like you get shafted. It was just a constant cycle of just people being mandated, overtired, cranky. Nobody wanted to do it either.
mm,
But that was at a time that instead of leaving ambulances empty and just running with a skeleton crew, like everything had to be filled up. So every crew had to be full, except for like the what did they call it? Not essential crews or whatever.
all the core cars had to be full.
That's what it was, core cars, yeah. And so instead of like nowadays, I think they just drop the car and just say, "Yep, all right, we just don't have enough staff, whatever." Before they were like, "Nope, all the core cars have to be filled." So you would be looking at the schedule and just like so anxious. Like that was the start of my anxiety. Was like the night before looking at the schedule, going, "Oh man, am I gonna get mandated?" Like
Well,
how
and
many
then
people?
after a while too, there was a lot of us that were, if we looked at it and we saw, we were on this shift, and we saw person X on this shift, we knew they were calling out, so we
Right.
would bang in for that shift. This way, we wouldn't get mandated for the next two.
It was such a negative cycle. The best thing they did was just say, like, all right, we're just gonna stop doing this. But dude, that was like a year of like hell.
Yeah.
Of that.
And
And
that was from the time that the Acura driving supervisor left,
right.
and the new person took over the scheduling and moved stuff around and whatnot. And then when the owner put down the hammer on all cars must be filled because of contract obligations and yada yada yada,
And then you started posting again.
then posting and system status started happening again.
Let's talk about that a little bit, right? Posting, because I know like Pat and I made a career out of that towards the end of our careers, just sitting in parking lots.
I need to sit on the south side of the city because the south side of the city is the most central to everything in the zone, except for where all my calls are in the north side of the city, which is closer to my station where I am not, which means that I must sit at the south side of the city.
Well, actually, another thing I think might have happened before you started working with us, Kervin, was certain managers would show up to the station and say, "Hey, the owner of the company just left the office. Everybody go." And we would all just go to the park or something.
Yep.
What, you thought you were new for that? Man, that'd been going on long before I showed up in 2013, dude. That'd been going on since like '06.
Yeah, that was like the funniest part was like, and then we'd all just have to get banished from the station. and nobody could be sitting around in this station, blah 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 blah. It was just, dude, some of the stuff that was like some of the dumbest stuff ever, man. Like let's just
You know
tire our
what though?
crews
It was
out.
our bosses being OGs and being like, "Hey, we don't want you to have to deal with this. Just get out."
Yeah, but like, why is it gonna be like that? Well, that's one of the part of the issues of the industry. Like, um, like employers just don't they care about like the financial part of it, and maybe it's like a healthcare thing. But what am I trying? I think I lost my train of thought on that. Um, but yeah, no, that's like part of the like it's you can't sit in the station because the owner's going to come by and he's going to want to cut crews because he doesn't think any work's getting done or whatever. But meanwhile, you're there for 24 hours and it's like, okay, you just expected me to work like a robot for 24 hours straight. It's just wild. And then the conversation becomes, well, so do we need to shorten shift lengths and ban 24s and then everybody just works 8-hour shifts and this and that. But okay, but then I'm at work 6 days a week instead of just 2 or 3, and I just become a zombie, I guess. Just constantly running
And
EMS calls.
and they would just hit you with the rotational shifts too.
Right.
24 on or 12 on, 12 off, 12 on, 12 off, 12 on, 12 off, 12 on.
And I could never do that. I could never, because 12 hours is not enough time to recover and live a good life. Because you figure you're supposed to get what, 8 hours of sleep. Say you got.
You're funny.
Listen, I'm talking about healthy people. I'm not talking about us. All right. So you're supposed to get your 8 hours of sleep. Say you got an hour in the morning, hour in the evening to like of travel time and getting ready time, just getting dressed, undressed, whatever. So that leaves you with 2 hours, but you got to eat. So, take an hour away there. So maybe you got like an hour of unwind time before you got to hurry up and go to bed and then go work another 12-hour shift.
Mm.
And just see some stuff that is really gonna bother you. Like that's one of the biggest issues, I guess. Um, but yeah, I mean, what do you guys think? Well, like Pat, like for you, like I really want to harp on the fact that you still have a career you stayed in, and we kind of touched on like some things that happened. But do you think, because you changed employers, um, to another
So,
agency or whatever, like do you think they were doing something different that helped you stick around, or was it something you did?
so the agency I was working for, man, it was good right up until COVID, and then things got real weird. The stress of the whole ordeal, the change in the industry, the change in the business, things changed, and I was fortunate enough to get on with a municipal EMS agency, and they've taken very good care of me. And the first 2 years, I took at least a $2 an hour pay cut to work at this municipal agency, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Um, it was a great change for me because I was in the kind of place where I worked with awesome people and we were expected to do good things, whatever that meant.
Mm.
And when I was in that space, that made a huge difference. And I've grown a lot inside that system, and they've given me a lot of opportunity. While it is still an EMS job and we do still suffer some issues, um, I found that an agency that believes that you are here wanting to do the right thing for the right reasons will always take better care of you than one that's not considerate of those features or metrics for measuring how a pre-hospital provider is approached.
Do you think that's a company issue or a systematic issue? I know that's a big question, but
Well, that is a big question. Name a thing. The answer is yes.
hmm
You're never going to find somebody who has to deal with a budget who cares as much about the ethical social issues as they do the financial issue they're handed. You're never going to find somebody in a higher level of management who understands what you're facing in emergency care.
right.
And so that is the plight of medicine as a whole. That is a plight of EMS. And that is something that we can work on as a group to improve our approach to those who render care to other people in extremis.
Well, so I guess where you're at now, like what's your schedule like now, Kervin? How often are you I guess like in the car, all that.
So I'm in a hybrid shift for 12 hours, and then I've got two dedicated office shifts where I still might wind up filling an ambulance or a paramedic spot.
Mhm.
And one day a week, I'm working as the supervisor, supporting the agency and taking care of crew and agency needs.
Okay. So like and do you think there's something about where you work now? Do they take pride in I guess mental health and just taking care not just mental health, but also like just taking care of their providers in a way of making sure everybody's okay and everybody's happy, things like that, or is it more of like a you kind of have to work on self-care too?
Uh, there's nobody on this planet who doesn't have to work on self care.
Mhm.
Uh, None of us are good at it, and if you are good at it, then don't talk to me.
I'm terrible at it, so
Um, you're probably not listening to this anyway if you're good at self care.
right.
Um,
There's one guy
now,
out there right now that's like, not me. I go for a jog twice a day, and I see therapy twice a week, and I only work 8 hours a day, and love my wife, and I have a happy family.
and I take off 3 weeks of vacation time a year, and you can find a place to shove that attitude.
I meditate, and I take my daily vitamin, and I eat
All right,
healthy.
if you don't stop, I'm going to come through this microphone and stab you. Now, if I look at, here's the thing: when you operate in some administrative capacity, you get a lot of complaints, you get a lot of problems, and that really taints the way that you look at your approach and your people. And what I found is driving out when I'm feeling the most discouraged about our people and what we're doing, I drive out and I sit and I talk with the crews and I talk about what makes things better and what we can do better and what they think about the way that we're processing work. And I leave feeling like $1,000,000 almost every single time. I work with some of the coolest people who are willing to support each other. People think that it's really on the top boss to build a culture or approach or a even fraternal order between coworkers, but what it really comes down to is leaving enough space for them to support each other.
Right.
And when you build a space and when you work on a space that's founded on leadership and of mutual support of your people, then you're always going to thrive. And I'm allowed in a lot of ways to build that in my own space, even if that's not agency wide. I've been allowed to take my own process to leadership, and being given that ability is what's made a huge difference in my desire to stick around. Because I can still run calls, I can still be there helping, I can be a consultant, I can be the person who's dealing with other paperwork crap, and I'm able to change what I'm doing every day and try to stay good at what keeps me right, which is being a dirty ambulance driver.
Right, right. Well, I think like if there was more of a uh, because well, you say like the word culture is really important, and we develop our own culture. Um, me and Andrew, like we had like our own little culture there in when we were working together, and like just like the crews were constant. We were all nobody was relatively new, so we had like that. What's the word I'm looking for here for like the I mean, but like we had like a bit
You
of a
had a
family.
fraternal bond.
Yeah,
You had
yeah,
this
yeah.
understanding, this mutual understanding, and this crewmentation.
And dude, it was almost like a dysfunctional family we had going on. The supervision we had wasn't great at all. When
No.
we were working the night shifts out there. I don't remember. Did you only work the night shifts on the 2 days I worked, or did you work the 24s too?
I did. So I did predominantly night shifts for the first like 4 years I was there.
Yeah, because I remember I would before I got online, I was working with Thompson for a while, and then who did I work with on the other day? That one I don't remember. I was Thompson and somebody else, and then when I got online, I was working with Adaji and you were there, but I was always 24s. But I remember you
And
always being there for the night shift portions.
you were working with Adam a lot too, right?
Oh, Coleman, yeah. That's yeah.
Were you his partner when he went into the hospital wearing his slides from the
Yes,
night before?
yes.
You two were the worst.
He's gonna be an interesting one further down the line because I'm gonna get a lot out of him. But me and him went through a lot together. We did a lot of bad things together. We grew up together. But like the interesting part was him and I both became EMTs at the age of 18, and we both got into a job where we were working 60 hours a week in the capital region. At the age of 18, and you don't know how to process shit at that age whatsoever.
No.
And the way him and I processed it was alcohol and drug abuse, partying, and destroying any interpersonal relationship we have with anybody.
That sounds like a great time.
And, like, at the time, it was pretty good, but it's done its damage, man. And like I used to always say, like I lived my life on the gas pedal. Like for me, it was alcohol, it was drugs, I was sober 2 days a week, and that's when I was on shift. And other than that, it was just I'm gonna run this car until I either hit something or run out of gas. And I never ran out of gas. And I never really I hit a couple things, but that thing kept going, you know. And he was the same way. He was right there with me the whole ride, you know. And like that's a perfect example of the fact of like we got in, and like you say, the first chapter of the book that we learned from is mental health and self-care and everything like that, and nobody reads it, and nobody teaches it. You know, maybe they do when you first start, but you know it's one of those like it's one of those things that needs to keep getting harped on. And like what you're doing there, Pat, I'm just going out and talking to people and checking on people. It's not only good for them, but it's good for you too. And like you're gonna take care of each other, and like you said earlier in the beginning, you know, Dunham checked on you and said, hey, maybe it's time to go inpatient. You did the same thing for me because I was saying some pretty bad things to you. You saved my life and said, hey, maybe it's time to go to inpatient. You went a step ahead and called the cavalry, and then they just came scoop me up because you knew I wasn't gonna go, and
Yeah.
that got me down the right path. And those kind of bonds start forming, and we start like helping each other that way, and we're kind of sort of saving lives, but we're still losing people through the cracks. So there's a need to just I guess start working on the prevention now.
Well, you know,
the lead
Kyle,
up.
the thing that makes me think of is what raised my ears to you, and I don't want to laud a whole thing. I didn't get to go and do anything cool, but I joined the Army Reserve out of high school because I didn't have a whole lot of option. And that's where I got my EMT basic training. That's where I learned some advanced life support modalities. And they teach in mass this thing called ACE, which is ask what's going on and how the person's feeling, care for your friend or your buddy or whoever you're dealing with, and then escort them to the appropriate level of care. And they mentioned people who are progressively becoming disheveled or not acting themselves or acting erratically or recklessly, or they look like the lights are on and nobody's home. And I was taught you gotta make sure that you got an ace in the hole for your friends.
Right.
That you ask, that you care, and that you escort them to the right place to be, because it's not about believing that there's only one way out. It's trying to figure out how to make the space that you're in a better option than dying.
Well, it's
And
like that's kind of sad that that's like the I guess the end there. You know, I mean, well, I guess it's the end for everything. But
well, no
unfortunately
one's
for us, it's either you get out or you die. You know?
well, that's not necessarily true. We've seen people retire.
Still getting out.
It's rare and it's getting out, but
Well, let me ask you before we get too far. How many retirement parties have you gone to? Is it more than one
5.
hand? Exactly, one
6.
hand. Okay, all right. You put a second hand in there. But like that brings us to the reason why the name of the podcast survived the 6.5. It was going to be something about 5 years, but we found out that we're 1.5 years longer on job expectancy. But I feel like when I first started, like coming out of EMT school, it was like 4 years, or maybe it was the 5 years. If that was how long people were staying on average, and now it's 6.5 years on average. And like, so say you're getting in at 20 and retirement age is 55, like 6.5 and 35. I don't, I ain't got to do the math, but that's a pretty big gap. And like you said, you've gone to 5 retirement parties. I've gone to 3 walkouts. Those are retirement parties I've been to. I've seen 3 people retire, and I've gone to more funerals than that.
Yep.
And like Pat, you and I were both really close to the story you were mentioning to that person in different capacities. Um, I lost a bunch of people I was very close to. And whether it's suicide or like we also know somebody that lost their life because of the battle of drug addiction, and that goes hand in hand. Alcohol and drug addiction goes hand in hand with the this job, and it's sad to say, but it really does. And I count that as a job related loss too, not just the suicides or whatever. Somebody that overdoses and passes away is somebody that needed to get help too. And it sucks that like we got to get better. They always say like you got to get better at recognizing your friends struggling. But
Well, and it also doesn't help that if you look statistically, I can't quote statistics because I haven't looked them up in recent memory. Um, but the average person that comes into EMS and makes it a career or makes it that 6.5, it came into EMS not necessarily the most stable person in the world.
oh, there's a massive thought out there that basically uh, everybody in this job, like hurt people want to help hurt people, and we're all hurt before we got in some way or another. We had chinks in our armor. We didn't exactly come out with the best deck of
Yep.
cards.
A totally sane person would walk in to run an EMS shift and then walk out the door at the end of it and never come back in.
100%.
Now, something to consider here is a piece that I've been trying to speak on for quite some time, and that's that EMS largely attracts those of us who are smart enough, have enough wit, have enough understanding to practice some level of medicine, but lack the socioeconomics to back up a degree that would allow us to do so, or a pathway that would allow us to do so. So when you take that understanding of the lowest level of socioeconomics that can practice some level of medicine, it makes perfect sense as to why we get the group of characters that we do within our systems.
Well, I'll bring up a perfect kind of example on that with socioeconomics is like for me, lower middle class family, inner city at the start, halfway through middle school, moved out to I guess a more suburby, rurally area, but I was still going to the same high school, which is in the inner city. Um, and there wasn't a lot of money there, so obviously college wasn't exactly the best option. That's how I became an EMT. But like for you two, I mean, was it kind of the same sort of story and background growing up? Like neither one of you guys came from a rich family.
No, I mean I can't. Yeah, I can't really speak for Pat 100%, but for myself at least, I came from a lower middle class family. We ate, but that was about all we got.
Right.
And college was a good luck, figure it out. And they made my parents made just enough money where I didn't get any help, but not enough money to help me.
And you probably got
So
a
the
job
option
early
was
on.
find a job that can train me.
Yours
Right.
filed their taxes so that you could file for public assistance? Wow, that's amazing. If I had good financial prospects, I wouldn't have joined the Army, and here we are. I can't say that was a bad thing for me. That might have been destined for me. I got the stupid haircut out of it. But that doesn't mean that I was a man of means. I was very thankful that my floors were not made of dirt.
Right. Well, like I think like just the three of us had the same sort of upbringing story, and I think you talk to anybody that we worked with, 95% of them probably had the same story. We were like lower middle class, um, a job that'll train you, right? And there's glory. There's like glory in it. you either knew somebody or your family had been doing first response for a long time, and you're like, man, I could change the world, I could be good, blah blah blah,
Well,
and then
there's a sense of community that comes with it.
well, there's a family aspect. There really was. I mean, when you're working with it, and I tell people this all the time, it's like the difference between, and Dunham, you could talk about this too, because you're out of it. I mean, you're still kind of working with first responders, I imagine. For me, I went straight to normal people, which I'm not accustomed to being around. But like,
So
I got out of
I don't deal as much interfacing with the actual first responders. I do a little bit. I went from EMS into an office slash warehouse style employment,
right.
and I learned pretty rapidly that they're not like us. I'll give you a funny story, real quick here. I got spoken to by the head of the HR department at my job because I had made one of my coworkers very concerned and very uncomfortable because I had been doing some work doing some metal fabrication, and a welding BB had come down and hit me in the forehead, and I jerked my head to the side and smashed my ear into the sheet metal.
Right.
And they saw me in my truck on lunch stitching my ear back up. And I got called into the HR office, and they were like, "This person saw you doing this in the parking lot." I was like, "Yeah, sure was. Why?"
Are you upset that I forewent the workers' comp claim? I mean, what do you have to complain about?
And then I think about all of the backyard doctoring that we've all done over the years, and I'm like, that
100%.
makes sense for us. It doesn't for them though.
I'm looking at a suture kit right now.
Maybe you shouldn't do that on this recording.
Well, I found it laying on the side of the road. I don't know how to use it. I've never used it before.
Yeah, it just fell off the truck, huh?
Actually, another funny story too, like it goes along that was when I moved away and had my job out like west there. I'm working with just normal blue collar people. Every day I'm going in with my thermos of coffee in my left hand and my little lunch pail in my right hand, my hard hat on. Like I went total blue collar normal job, right? And one day, one of the truck drivers, excuse me, went into cardiac arrest, right? And everybody's just kind of panicking, not knowing what to do. And I started CPR. So I just started doing CPR until the ambulance got there. Gave the patient to the ambulance.
The old equivalent of, is there a doctor on the plane?
Right. And I'm talking people through what to do. Because it all just kind of comes back. I'm like, okay, somebody needs to call 911. Do we have an AED? And now I realize why American Heart does what they do. It's kind of funny when you're a provider. Like, go call 911. Go get the AED. Like, doing all that. Like, as providers,
when you're a civilian, they're all just standing there looking at you.
This guy's on the ground.
The number of times you have a partner who says something colossally stupid and you have to correct them without being a jerk, and so you just quote the video.
Right. And
I need you to compress at 100 to 120 times a minute, please.
Dude, I turned into the guy doing the CPR course, like dictation or whatever for American Heart. Go get the AED. Okay? Go call 911. You go get help. You come over here. We need you to do 30 compressions to 2. We didn't even do that. We just did straight compressions. But like,
it sounds like even after leaving this job, it's really affected you on the way that you approach a scenario, a situation, or an emergency, doesn't it?
You know what? This is actually kind of funny because I've been working through this in therapy. Ding, I'm going to therapy now. It's a big thing for me.
Thank goodness.
I've needed it for over a decade, and I'm finally doing it now.
Wait, Kyle, haven't you needed it for about 28 years?
I've needed it since the day I came out of my mother.
You know what? Most of us do. Go off, King.
But I have this issue where if things are going too well for a long time, and it might be some part of myself sabotaging, is I have this like. What is the word? Like a craving, I guess. Like when I was going through rehab and stuff like that, like craving drugs, craving alcohol. Like I now have those same cravings for just an emergency to happen. and it's such a weird feeling, and I don't feel okay about it because it's kind of sickening because but like but all three of us, we got adrenaline rushes. I'm sorry, I hate to say it, cancel me, but we all got
Well,
adrenaline rushes from helping other people in emergency. Like people's worst days of their life gave us adrenaline rushes, but that
well,
was part of the job.
here's the thing. There's not a 25-year-old alive, 25-year-old male alive, who can say that they weren't at a bar thinking about throwing hands for the fun of the game,
Right,
right?
right,
For the love of the game.
yeah,
And there were plenty of nights that any of us went in to a city that it felt like abused us, that we wanted them to go ahead and fight, go ahead and swing. We want you to
yeah.
make us do this difficult job because some of it's a challenge, some of it's fraternity, and some of it's just, man, this job sucks and I'm trying to have a good time with it. Let's pretend it's the Wild West.
I go like one of the best stories I got there is I went to a call, obviously with HIPAA and stuff. I don't want to get too far involved in like too many details, but it was a cardiac arrest and it was a pediatric patient in the middle of the night, right? So we all know that that's not what you want to go on ever. Like those are some
And
of the worst
especially
calls.
considering once you're going on it already, you know how the outcome's going to turn out most of
Yeah,
the time.
I mean
It's
this.
the worst call of your career every single time.
Yeah, I mean this patient was less than a year old, and
Ugh.
basically the details was like how they tell you don't breastfeed in bed, and that's what happened. Breastfed in bed and rolled over on baby, fell asleep, you know, and we worked this baby all the way to the hospital. Never got baby back. Um, never could really, we luckily I was able to actually intubate this baby halfway to the hospital, which is actually one of the greatest feats of my career because you know how hard that could be. Is it could get a
Yeah.
tube in a newborn or at that age.
An infant of any
Yeah,
real month age, you've got some real challenges there.
and I don't remember the details on the age totally, but it was probably between like 4 and 8 months, that kind of area,
Oh.
and got a tube. Um, and obviously it's a hypoxic arrest. So, the oxygen is very important. We did CPR all the way down, and I was with some great providers. I was with a certain supervisor that me and Kervin used to bash heads with that ran our station. And Pat, I think you know what we're talking about. And but
Wait,
we
were
got
they
back.
sensitive to electromagnetic waves or?
Not that one, not the
Oh,
other
the
one.
other one. Then yes, I understand exactly.
Yeah. So, but and I used to
LED lights.
her and I.
Oh dear.
Oh dear, oh dear, Pat. But like her and I used to bash heads all the time, and you know this, and we did not like each other, but we did, and it was a weird. But after that call, we got out to the EMS room. I go out to smoke a cigarette because we all know how great that cigarette hits after a bad call like that, right?
Yeah, with those horrible Camel crushes.
Oh
Ugh.
god, I was a menthol all the way, and
At least it wasn't Newport's.
well, that's what I
Yeah.
moved to. When I moved away, that's what I moved to was Newports. Yeah, I went from Camel
Do better.
Crushes. Me and Coleman went from smoking Camel Crushes to doing Newports.
If you're smoking either of those, just do better.
Right, right.
Jeez.
And they weren't even all the way Camel Crushes. Half the time they were Silvers.
I've got nothing on your microphone, Kyle.
Sorry, my son came in. I told him I was like, sorry,
So,
buddy, I'm doing something.
No,
But
you're
anyways,
right to cut us off for that. Now, what can we do for you?
but yeah, so and but anyway, so we get done with the call and everything like that, and her and I bash heads all the way, but like go out and smoke a cigarette, and she's like got her head on my shoulder, I'm holding on to her, and it's just that fraternity feeling of like we just went through one of the worst experiences of our life. We don't know how to deal with it. Nobody's going to help us deal with it. We're going to have to put this away. We still got 4 hours left in the shift, so you don't know if you're going to get hit with something else again that you need to be 100% for. But at that point in time, her and I were family, And,
Well, and that's one of the things that I miss having gotten out more than anything else, is even if you didn't like somebody or they didn't like you and you didn't get along,
there was a lot of that.
if something messed up happened, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on your podcast or
Oh,
not.
you go ahead, curse.
something fucked up happened. Y'all had each other's backs. You even no matter what happened, and it didn't matter if it was hey, I'll cover the rest of your shift. If it was hey, I'll take the next call. If somebody's having a hard time with something, and that was one of the things that I miss is the fact that we didn't have to get along for us to have each other's back on the job.
But how raw did you have to become in order to support somebody who you otherwise wouldn't deal with?
It took about a year and a half. No, maybe less. It took me about 6 months to get there.
But
You got to realize the first call I went on, we delivered a baby.
You shouldn't do that. It's like super bad for you.
And it should have been like a premonition of how bad my career is going to go. Because I became a black cloud through and through, all the way. But, no, I mean, I think that's like a great point, man. Like, there were people, you hated people. But you're also like, you live with these people. So you're going to hate people, you're going to like people, but like, at the end of the day, we were just one big happy family. And I miss that too, man. Working with the normies now. Every job I've worked, I've wanted
in that environment, you know what you're going to get from these people 90% of the time.
Well, because if you couldn't survive under the pressure, if you cracked under the pressure, you didn't last.
Yeah, or if you were one of those people that, there was a young man once who let a regular partner of mine get the shit kicked out of her and just stood there and watched. Those types of people don't last very long in this field.
Job's got a way of weeding those people out. I think we've all been in fist fights too. Like that's a bad part. That's a part that doesn't ever get talked about. Ever. How many times have you been assaulted? I've been pepper sprayed, while working.
Just once?
I've been pepper sprayed. I've been accidentally dry tased by the police department on a call. I've
shot at, spit on, swung on. Kyle, you were with a patient who went toe-to-toe with me and were like, dude, I can't believe you exercised that kind of restraint. And I'm like, man, what can we do with this kid who's 12 years old?
That was the kid. Yeah.
Mom, I need a cigarette. And Mom screams back, honey, you gotta wait.
I remember we got that kid, a little punk, and he was going from one hospital to another hospital for obvious mental health care. I think it was, or something. And he's telling the mom that he wants a cigarette, and, he hates her, and blah, 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 and all this and that.
And she yells back, honey, you gotta wait. That's your response for your 12 to 14-year-old kid?
Some people parent a little different, I guess. But,
like, a lot of people don't understand the things that, the things that mess a lot of us up. Aren't always the bad calls or the bad runs. It's just the repeated abuse. Like, I worked 2 4th of July shifts my entire career at the commercial agency we all worked at.
Right.
And I will never work a single one again.
My first year and my last year that I was there. And I did that because on my first 4th of July shift, I got assaulted no less than 4 times. I had people rolling M80s and half sticks and, 3-inch mortar balls out into the middle of the road underneath the ambulance. One of the rescue companies we responded with from the municipal to fire department got shot at.
Oh, jeez, I was on mute the entire time. My bad.
And they would send these M80s and bottle rockets into your truck trying to blowing up like it was GTA 5.
Were either one of you there for the stampede down in the for the fireworks?
Which one? The one where they ran over a bunch of girls who were thrown into a deep fryer? No, I wasn't there at all.
There was I was in charge of it. It was the first year I was in charge of one of the Oh wait, was it that one? No, because I ran, like, for our company, I ran, I think, 2 or 3 years worth of the fireworks as, like, the head honcho guy, coordinating it. But I don't think it actually was. I think I might have been working with Thompson. Somebody threw a bunch of M80s in the crowd, and there was a stampede. Like, people got trampled. Like, it was bad.
Oh, that was a later year where I said, yeah, that's why I don't work 4th of July.
Down at the plaza.
Yeah, it was at the plaza, yeah.
I want to say that was, like, 19?
It might
No,
have been. I think
it
it
was
was earlier
15
than that.
because 14 the year prior they'd set off a box set of mortars in the middle of the crowd, and that's what I was dealing with.
Or like you guys both remember the raves at that one venue.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Or
and,
like
at the end of the boulevard.
the frequent flyers we'd pick up out in the bus corral right in front, right around 1 in the morning.
But like the raves and stuff for there that we were going back to back to that place and pulling out people that were assaulting us and that were actively dying from polypharm overdoses and
Right. Another dude. That was a wild city to work in.
What do you think the effect of that was over the course of 60 hours a week?
I think you just start to, unfortunately, because you get really good at compartmentalizing, obviously. And I think you just start to slowly deteriorate to the point where you just kind of become numb to everything. One of the weirdest things about when I got out of the, I heard that when I get out of the job was starting to feel feelings again. I don't know if you experienced that, Dunham, or not.
Oh, I experienced that not even leaving the job, but going from a higher volume to a lower volume agency.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Andrew?
It took a while for me. And I think that might have had something to do with some of the medications and stuff that I had went on because of a lot of the stuff that I had been dealing with from EMS. Where it took me till probably a year and a half ago to like not just be completely like just blasé to everything. Just meh.
Wasn't that like a weird feeling though?
It is because it's like you. And it's an overwhelming one too.
Oh yeah, that's the hardest part. Is it doesn't come back. It doesn't trickle back. It's just one day you're dead to everything, and then the next day you're just fucking bang.
Oh yeah, and then you're starting to think about stuff that happened, 5-6 years ago, and things that you did and didn't do, or and you're just like, okay, can you slow your roll a little bit there, brain?
That's actually a really good point, and I don't know how. I'm ready to trauma process, but like, because you say like things you did or didn't do. Like, is there anything that sticks with you guys, like that? I don't know how far you guys want to get in here.
So for me, one of the biggest regrets and things that I look at and it really genuinely bothers me, was I got very unpleasant towards a lot of my lower acuity patients towards the end of my career, because it was, are you really fucking calling me for this?
Well, I think that's an interesting point though, because that's like the whole idea of this podcast is that the lack of like health towards us, like help that we're getting, and then the overall like mandatory overtime and just like things that are expected out of us just makes you lose your empathy and your love for the job and stuff.
100%. And it's one of those things where when you're in the constant grind like that, you start to get to a point where you find it very difficult to conceptualize and rationalize the fact that I just did CPR on a 4-month-old and didn't get them back, and now I've got to go pick this person up because they had too many natty daddies and fell asleep and pissed themselves.
Right.
Wow, it sounds like you've been on that call before. I've been on that call before. Have you? How about you, Kyle?
That one happens nightly, more than once.
Well, and you look at that now you're as a provider and as somebody who's in the position you're in this career, you're supposed to have empathy and be compassionate towards all patients at all times, irregardless of their situation or yours.
Right.
And that is a wonderful ideology to have. Unfortunately, it's not something that happens very often.
With burnout,
and it's called compassion fatigue. Mm-hmm.
You mean that you learned how to say "fuck 'em" before you could walk? That was one of the most important lessons any partner ever taught me, was learning to say that isn't my problem to have to bear. One of
I
the most sour, nasty acting partners I've ever had. The stories I should not tell you. Looked at me one day and said, fuck them. And it turned out to be one of the most important lessons I'd ever learned was that other people's problems have to belong to them. Otherwise, we're not going to survive if we have to take on everybody else's issues at the same time as our own.
well, I think the issue is you have to be the hero
Yeah, you have
while
to provide that face and that front to each and every person you interact with, because it's not only your employment obligation, it's realistically your moral obligation.
well, like, so
Um,
here's a perfect thing to bring up, right? Like, we all know about that video that circulated Facebook, right? Of the two providers that made somebody walk to the ambulance and they fell down
Oh
and
my
yeah.
god, the series of
Oh,
them almost made me puke.
yeah.
yes.
And but I want to know the progression of that. I'm not saying these people, maybe both providers. I never knew either one of the providers. I know you guys might have, Pat. You might have because you kind of worked down that way for a while. But I didn't know either one of them. But I knew people that I trust very well that said that they weren't the great whatever. I'm not speculating on that. But what I'm going to say here is let's make this a generic sort of thing that happened and look at the lead up. To these people burn out. Like, were they at the beginning of the career? Were they like
Yep.
gung ho, wanting to help people, love everybody, lots of empathy, this and
Here's
that?
my question, Kyle. Who is so worn down that they're allowing this kind of behavior?
Nah, yeah,
Now,
no,
listen,
that's yeah,
crappy people exist every day, and a good person would not in any way, shape, or form set up their patient the same way that that crew did. Now, throwing all of that aside, the real concern there that I think you're bringing up is that when you have all this compassion fatigue, the best of your providers are completely worn out. And if the
hmm
best you've got is what's left of your worn out great providers, then I think we need to work to a higher standard of what kind of patient we're trying to treat and what kind of profession we're trying to build. If you ask most people, what is the point of emergency medical services? They'll say, get the patient to the hospital with a pulse. And I say to them, that's the job of a fucking Uber.
right, right,
I say, if your goal isn't to preserve life, alleviate suffering, and decrease in hospital stays where applicable, then why are you even here? Now, the big issue is that when you run into low acuity after low acuity, you've got middle manager after middle manager who doesn't care about you because they're working on their own career and what's working out for them. And then into a space where you're still not praised for the work you do, but you're punished for anything that gets complained about. You really find yourself in a position where it's like, man, am I rising to do the right thing because it's right? Or am I serving people who don't want to be inconvenienced? That's the real plight of any emergency provider who wants to do good in their community.
right.
We want to do the right thing, but do we feel supported enough to continue doing that?
Well,
Well,
I think you just summarized it perfectly, perfectly. Like, I don't know if I was writing I guess like the plight of the modern day EMT and paramedic. Like, I think you just summarized it perfectly. There's a lot to unpack there too. You know, um, I like the fact that you kind of bring up the like, especially the part of middle management trying to progress their own careers and I had actually just talked to a provider. I'm not gonna name drop or whatever, but this guy is a high level, um, I guess like supervisor or whatever. And Pat and I had a lot of interactions with him. Uh, Dunham, you definitely know who I'm talking about. We'll talk about it off air. But he was telling me about the struggles he's having at the agency he's working at. Of there's all these people that want to get out of the ambulance to do things and progress their career and stuff, and a lot of people lose that sort of I guess viewpoint on the job. And it's just like it's a total mess right now. And I think like even like the way the public kind of looks at us, and they don't understand all the things that we can do. Like when I stopped working as a paramedic and I got out and I just talked to people, a lot of people just literally thought we just bagged and tagged people, put them on a stretcher, and drove them to the hospital. I'm like, nah, dude, there's so many cool things we could do, like to save lives. Like that's what we're doing. So we're out there doing every day. And like,
Not to mention the load of crap that you're going to get from your coworkers over the way that you're doing it.
oh, well, that's the other issue is like the competitive part. Is the shit talking. You know? Well, I'll be like, Dunham, you'll never get
You
to
say
us.
that's a problem, but it might be a good part.
But it pushes you to be better. That's why.
Sometimes.
But it can get overbearing too. You know? Like it could get to the point where you're trying to be a great provider, but always in the back of your head is like now you get into the part of like feuds and people not liking each other, and then stations get torn apart. I think luckily the three of us at the agency we all worked at together, we got lucky to get on good crews at good stations most of our career. But I got stuck out when I first started in the land of the West on the wrong side of the Hudson River. And and it was very cliquey at the time. And when I got in, it was sit down, shut up, you don't talk. I didn't talk to anybody for 3 fucking months. But you earned your respect and stuff like that. But there was people that got forced out of that station just for not fitting in or butting heads, and that could be the toxicity of the job too. And I guess that could be the negative part of that.
Well, and that was actually something that me and Pat had talked about the other day, where at this particular agency, every single station had its own personality and its own individual set and subset of people that could work there.
Or liked being there. They had personalities that jived with the personality of the station.
And if you think about it, I mean, we had the Old Timers Club, we had the Frat House, we had
The sub-frat house off of Union.
yeah, and then all those.
We had the Young Wanna Be a Professionals Club.
Mm-hmm.
That was running off the central point of everything. And when you look at all those different stations, when you've got old timer station and old timer station, and young people station and young people station, and young people who don't want the rest of that station, then you really wind up in a position where you've got a place for everybody. But is everybody going to feel in the place where they're working? What do you really have that unites the workers other than the strife against your own entity? It really creates kind of this interesting paradox that kind of runs into the holistic problem of EMS. How do you create a space where people aren't fighting because they're bored?
Right. No, I guess it's also one of those sick parts about it too is like um bored hands in the first responder community, like people that are bored end up getting in trouble. That's when we do stupid things. But we're bored because we're not getting the appropriate calls or whatever, which then comes down to you're bored because people aren't having emergencies. And that's the sick part. And I think that's the part that screws up the wiring in our heads too, is that
well, and it's I've made the joke a lot of times, and actually made part of this joke earlier to you before we went on air, where EMS is both like a mental illness and like a domestic violence relationship.
100%.
Because you love to hate to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where a whole lot of people wind up. And some people lose their way and lose sight of why they are doing the job. And a lot of the times those people leave and move on to other jobs. Sometimes they stay, but a lot of the times they leave.
And
then some people, are able to maintain focus and keep track of that. And they are the ones who usually wind up putting in those, very few retirement parties that we all get to go to.
Yeah, and
and then there's everybody in the middle.
I think you and I are in the middle.
Yeah.
Pat's gonna have a big retirement party someday when I'm in the ground rotting because my heart gave out because I found out I like to eat, you know. But like I think that becomes the sad part about it. Again, survive the 6.5. I mean, if you can make it long enough in your career, you stick around for a while. Or some of the people that get out, like there's some people we've worked with that have done some sick things criminally, and
Yeah.
you kind of wonder sometimes, like, was that person always like that? Because again, this job attracts people that are sick in the head to start, or did something about this job kind of do that and lead them down that path? And that's kind of like the scary part about it. Is one day you're talking to somebody and you know somebody, and the next day they're arrested for something that's sickening, or you're going to their funeral because they took their own life, or you know,
It gets really confusing and really hard to rationalize sometimes.
yeah.
Because this
Well,
is somebody who you were required to trust as part of your job. This is
we
somebody who you were required to believe would have your back, and then you find out that they've got kitty porn or a heroin problem, and you're really kind of taking on your back foot, aren't you?
right. I mean, it's kind of like a. Well, I think all of us had skeletons, and some people had a thicker door, and some didn't. But eventually, those hinges rust, and the door falls off. And like for me, I think the door fell off. I put it back on, and it fell off again. you know, but I think I got lucky enough to just have drug addictions and alcohol addictions instead of some of the more sickening things, like you said, kitty
Are
porn.
you saying that you were lucky enough to multitask?
Yeah, that, and I was lucky enough to have people that looked out for me too, though. That were like, "Hey, you're not doing good." Like I think you remember, like you were talking about, people start getting disheveled, they start not acting right, this and that. They start checking in on you, and then you say the
You
wrong
know,
thing, and before you know
here
it, you're getting the help you need.
here's the thing, and here's the difference in my career as a whole. I went and I was working EMS, and I was also waiting tables. I was working as the head waiter for a small breakfast joint, right?
Mm.
So I asked a friend of mine who I worked with, who'd been a supervisor, and who'd done all this cool paramedic work, and I said, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm 19 years old. I'm running the front end of a diner. And this person who'd been a paramedic for some time told me, hey man, listen, if you take care of the people who you have in your stead, they will do everything they can to take care of business, and they'll do more than you ever bargained for. You just got to make sure they have what they need.
Right.
And if when somebody's having a hard time, instead of saying, what's wrong with you, you ask, what do you need, what's different, what's wrong, you often find that there's something you can easily fix that helps that person do better. If you walk in with the idea that the person in front of you wants to do good things, and you want to help them make good things happen, then you can't go wrong.
Hmm.
And whether that's me holding up a dream, whether that's a work partner who became a very good friend, who's taught me a lot, having a pie in the sky idea,
Right.
whatever it is, all I know is that true leadership means taking care of the people in your stead to best help them do the damn thing. And that's what I've really settled down to, is it's not a race of agency, it's not a race of sorts, it's a race of trying to help people and do bigger, better things faster and better than others can figure it out, because this is a young job, man. Nursing's been around since the first healed femur. Fire's been around since the 1790s with Ben Franklin. Police have been around since Cain hit Abel with that rock. And
What?
EMS has been around since 1960. And if we're not willing to stand by what we're doing and try to progress the profession, then you're not fully sold into it, which means that maybe you weren't abused enough.
Well, it kind of makes me laugh of like when people get these like cushy jobs right off the rip, and they go to like some municipal agency that doesn't do a lot of calls, and they got all these cool
Makes you
technologies.
jealous, doesn't it?
Well, I think it makes me go, well, how are they going to be a good provider? They didn't suffer.
Well, and unfortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, there's more than a grain of truth to that.
Right.
You know, in all the years that I've been doing this, and I've been around the people that do this, and very rare is the occasion that I can find a strong, competent medic who came without having gotten their dicks kicked in on a commercial agency for at least a year.
You have
Well,
to.
they say that in any job, your first 30,000 cases are the most difficult, and the more cases you see, the faster you reach that number.
What's the
Why
thing
do you
they
think
used to?
doctors from New York City, Miami, and Los Angeles are in such high demand?
What's the thing they used to say? You had to kill somebody before you really knew how to save them or something.
It might have been six, but you leave special ed out of this.
he like he had some great sayings, man, and it was kind of true. And I think what he's getting at there is you don't have to murder somebody before you know how to save his life, but like I think you got to suffer a little bit before you know how to like get good.
Handle an emergency.
Well,
Yeah.
because the thing is you never in this field. I've seen a lot of people get there first. A lot of people. And you never know how you're going to react to the first time you see a dead guy until the first time you see a dead guy.
Right. Well, that's the thing too is like when I'm on a call, and I think one of the reasons why I stuck around commercial was because when I'm out there on a bad call and shit hits the fan and things are going crazy and you're supposed to be the hero, I need somebody behind me that's just some old salt dog. He might be a scumbag. He might drink 30 beers a night. You know, he might have destroyed every interpersonal relationship he has, be in debt to the IRS, hole in his pants, you know,
You leave
whatever.
my parents out of this.
Like, whatever. But when the shit hits the fan, like, they're going to know what to do. And we're just going to work together as one, like, big cohesive, like, team. And we're going to get there and we're going to do it. We're just going to do it. Everything's going to be good. Rather than I get stuck in some county agency or something like that that's going to take good care of me and we're going to do good. But I got this kid that's got a year and a half of the job, but he's only worked at this job that does like 20 calls a week or whatever, maybe less. And, you know, we get to grandma's trying to die and they just freeze up. And now I have to take care of him and her. And this is never where I want to be, ever. That's why I say, like, I think you got to suffer a little bit. You got to go through the motion. You got to get beat up, legitimately, figuratively and literally, and whatever the other word is. Like you have to have a patient punch you in the face. You got to get spit on. You got to have bodily fluids in places you don't want them. You got to be
Oh,
sleep
the
deprived.
4-day-olds are the worst.
Yeah, like you got to get beat up, man, before I guess you're eventually going to be good at the job. I don't know. Like I mean, maybe there's some other people that kind of I don't know are good as soon as they get out of school or whatever. But you got to get a little salty before your back's got to
Well,
hurt.
and-
Like if
and
your back
I
doesn't
also,
hurt
I
yet.
met a lot of paramedics that did the 0 to hero type stuff. That,
Right.
You know, when they ran through and it was a medical call, they were doing a phenomenal job.
Mm-hmm.
Throw them in a rest or a trauma, and the entire world implodes.
Well, there's a lot of chaos in those calls. So much chaos.
It's all emotional chaos. The only thing about a trauma is turning off the screams.
Well, it's not
And
your
as soon as you learn
emergency.
to turn off the screams, everything's fine. But if you can't, then they're just going to cloud your brain for the rest of your life.
Well, I think that's why damaged people do so good at that because you could turn it
Have
off
the
easier
lambs
because you've
stop
been
screaming,
turning it
Kyle?
off your whole life.
It sounds like the lambs have stopped screaming. What do you think, Andrew? Oh no, I hear screaming in the background. Are you still there? Are you alive?
I got my son came in with a cookie. He brought me a cookie.
Yeah, I made
Okay.
it for you.
Oh, thanks, buddy.
And when
All right.
in the back.
Thanks, buddy. Pat and Andrew say hi, bud.
Bye. Pat and Andrew said hi.
Hi.
All right, buddy.
Hi.
Go out there.
Do you mind leaving us alone so we can talk to your dad quick?
We gotta finish up. We
It's
gotta.
a cowboy.
Yeah, sure. It's my cowboy. Yeah, you guys are my cowboy. I don't know where he got that one from, but But
Close enough.
well, that's a thing that ruined my career right there too, is having a kid. Because I started feeling emotions I never felt before, especially when I was at work, and I stopped being this stone cold rock hard guy that like things didn't get to me. I started having cracks in the foundation. You know, I couldn't go on bad calls or and not eventually start thinking about like my son at home, my wife, like things
It
like that.
changes you.
Yeah,
Having a kid, especially in this career field, it changes you
it
a lot.
softens you up.
Um, you know, there's so many instances of things that I think about how I would have reacted before I had my son versus how I did react afterwards. Kid calls or like, you walk into the shitty abusive mom who's ODing on the couch and
I
you see all these kids that they don't have a chance in the fucking world.
And it's sad, man. And it wasn't sad to me before. I hate to say it. Like it was.
No, before it was Tuesday.
Yeah, before it was like this is just what you see every day. I wish it wasn't happening. There's nothing I can do about it. No matter what I do, it's always going to happen. But then you think
And
about
then you get like this righteous parental anger almost.
yeah, well it's almost like I don't know how to explain it, but you get this feeling deep down that's like holy shit, like what if my son was suffering like that or whatever.
It's like a social conscience.
Well, a conscience, yeah, that's something I didn't have for a long time. And I have it now. It's not as great as like regular people, but it's there.
What even calls anything regular anyway?
But it's present. That's half the battle.
Right, right. But I guess well, I mean that's like one thing that like really screwed me up though is having a kid, and I'm glad I'm not the only one. And but
I didn't start seeking mental health care and trying to fix some of my issues until after I had my kid.
I really didn't. Yeah, I didn't.
I
See
mean,
a
you
therapist
were
and stuff
there.
like that.
You were there to see some of the real low points for me.
Yeah, I mean,
With
well,
the
I was.
alcohol and the fucking. I got real fucking nasty with people and shit.
Are you saying that when things are going poorly, you should have a baby?
No.
No,
Oh.
it's what you do.
But I was at a real low point, and that was kind of the catalyst that forced me to start realizing that I was okay, and that it was okay to not be okay.
Dude, I love that. It's okay to not feel okay. I've seen that on T-shirts, and I wonder how many people actually like understand that. But it really is. It's okay not to be okay, man.
Well,
really
it
is.
kind of lends you to the idea that as we work our way through these career fields, we learn what that means for us.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of loss that we suffer. There's a lot of ways that we could support each other better. There's a lot of ways that we could use leadership to improve our space. But when we look at EMS as a career as a whole, what we're really looking for is support in each other. And that's what made this job worth anything, from Johnny and Roy all the way up to present day.
Yeah.
So when you look at what you're doing to build your EMS agency or your EMS longevity, what you really need is people who are willing to admit their own faults and approach others in order to prevent the mistakes in them. The worst thing I've ever had is a partner who told me about a mistake that they made that I had also made. And I said, "What the hell? Why did you not tell me about that? You doomed me to reproduce it." And they said, "What am I supposed to do? Tell my partner that I'm a piece of shit?" And I went, "Well, if you told me about that mistake, I wouldn't have made the same one."
Well, that's the pride issue, isn't it?
Well, it's a pride issue, it's an industry issue, it's a litigation issue, it's a number of things.
Well, I mean,
But
we were always taught where, like, if there was something that fucked up that was happened, it didn't happen, chart accordingly.
Right, and then you want to in this newer understanding of just culture and saying chart accordingly, and I will advocate for you accordingly. And the hard part is that it takes time from chart accordingly to believing in advocation. Mm-hmm. And bosses who believe in advocation being part of their job.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that was something that me and you tried really hard, and unfortunately, we succeeded in our station, but it didn't take root everywhere else. Where we didn't like putting paper on people because once you put paper on somebody, they stop listening.
I got paper put on me because I didn't put paper on people.
Yep.
Try saying that 3 times fast.
Yeah, I refused a few too many write-ups, and I got two of my own counselings for it.
They just didn't send me those because they knew I'd say screw off.
And that because I didn't like putting paper on people because I always found, and Pat did too, because we had many conversations about it, that if I sat down with somebody and I was like, why did you do the thing? A lot of the times 70% of the time they had a logical, thought out reason why they did it. It was wrong.
Yeah.
But it was logical and thought out, and then I would be like, hey, you were wrong.
Right.
But here's why. Don't do that shit again, and I'm going to put this piece of paper in the shredder over here.
That's the way to do it, man. It's like, we're all humans. You can't take the human aspect out of it. You really can't. And, like, unfortunately, we need to dehumanize ourselves to be good at that job. Kind of sucks, but that's what you got to do.
Well, and that's something a lot of, I'd say almost every civilian doesn't realize. Anybody who's never worked in a fire truck, an ambulance, the military, police car, something they don't realize is how much of your own humanity you have to leave at the door sometimes.
Right.
In order to do this job. How many people have looked at you, Kyle, and been like, I don't understand how you do that job. I don't know how you could see that stuff and then just be completely fine and do it again the next day.
I don't know how I did it either.
And that's the answer that most of us have, too. That's a great fucking question. When I figure it out, I'll let you know.
The funniest question is like, oh man, you must have seen what's the worst thing you've ever seen? Or like, what's some of the worst stuff you've ever gone through? And it's like, I don't know. I've compartmentalized everything so bad that I don't even remember what I did last shift. Or like, sometimes somebody will be like, oh, tell me some war stories. And it's not until I get around people like you guys, and like we just say something, it's like, oh yeah, remember that time? Or something like that. And it's just like that's just you really dehumanize yourself. You turn your brain off and you stop working as a proper human being. Kind of
At the
sad.
same time, what are you going to say? You going to talk about the 5-year-old girl who was dancing with a family dog, got her face ripped apart? Or the time that the wife of 20 years with her husband who had just retired from military service, she found him dead in the attic from a massive PE? What are you going to tell the people, Kyle?
Right. Well, that's the thing. And they don't understand that of like. But I also think it comes out of a perception problem where people don't understand what EMTs and paramedics really do.
Well, and a large part of that boils back down to, not to get political, but the fact that EMS in a lot of states, but particularly the one that we all reside in, is considered a non-essential service.
Mm-hmm.
They changed that this year.
Did they really?
In this state.
They haven't officially passed it yet. It was voted on. They haven't passed it. I hope that does go through.
Fair.
But it's not considered an essential service. Therefore, a lot of the grants and the money and stuff that will go to things that are an essential service, to go towards mental health and retention and, helping your employees and whatnot, doesn't go to EMS.
Right.
Municipal or otherwise. Particularly not if you're in commercial, in fact.
Well, commercials, yeah. Well, and for people that don't know what that is,
nobody really sees what we actually do, besides like the 3% of the population who doesn't do EMS that also watches Night Watch.
Well, like even that show, I don't even think breaks down. I mean, it kind of does, but like
it doesn't break down as much of the suck, but it's more present than something like Johnny and Roy.
Yeah, I mean, there's some mundane shit where you're not always the hero. Like you're just playing taxi driver because the same guy you pick up every night that's drunk on Natty Daddy's behind the McDonald's wants to go to the hospital, or he got kicked out of the hospital and now this is his third ambulance ride of the day, wants to go. And I mean, that's a whole discussion on insurance and fraud and everything we could talk, but we ain't even touching that today. Like, But we're getting pretty close to 90 minutes. I think 90 minutes is a pretty good cap off on time wise. But like, I wanna, I guess, any final thoughts you guys think we should, or anything you guys want to touch on that's real good in these last like 5 minutes or so. Maybe a
I
good
would
war
just
story.
say that EMS is one of those jobs where, if you consider that nursing's been around since the first healed femur, policing's been around since Cain hit Abel with a rock, and policing's been around since the, I'm sorry, firefighting's been around since the 1780s, 1790s, professionally speaking, and you look at EMS being around since the 1960s, then we have to have some level of understanding for the way that a career develops, but we also have to put leadership first in our approach, because if we're overrun by managers instead of leaders, then we wind up losing people, and people suffer because they don't have the kind of support systems they need. People need to feel safe enough to fail within their own space, and when you have a requirement for that, you wind up with a better culture of safety and EMS providers as a whole within your own region.
I think one of the issues with failure in this job, though, is failure is really detrimental when you got somebody's life in your hands, too. So it becomes another stressor. And, there's so much anxiety in that. Especially, like, when you become, like, a paramedic, you get so many more tools. There's so many more negative outcomes, too.
You know, Kyle, I'm going to pause you right there. If you're going to be dumb, you got to be tough. And sometimes those are odds you got to nut up to. Let's be honest here.
It's true, though.
If this is a job you're looking to do and take on, you have to understand that God decides who lives and dies, and I give them morphine while we wait for the decision.
Right.
And if that's not what we're teaching our students, then we're failing them.
Well, that's the issue. I don't think we teach them that.
Speak for yourself.
Well, no, you as but you're
also...
you're relatively new at education, and I trust you as an educator to teach just based off of conversations that you and I have had all throughout our careers. Like, we've both learned from each other so much just from those conversations of every time when Pat and I became supervisors at the same station. We relieved each other almost every shift or whatever, and every time we'd have coffee ready, and there was an hour before you went home that you sat down and we just drank coffee with each other and we just talked, whether you were coming in or out, and we just decompressed. We talked about things, we learned, and made sure each other was okay before we split up, and I think you're going to be good at teaching because of that, because of things like that, interactions like that.
So that leaves me with the question, Kyle. Is this about the way that we run our shop, or the way that we train our new folk? Or is it both?
I think it's a little of everything. But we also we started off this the podcast just talking about mental health is just the first chapter of the book. And that's it, and there's an education issue right off the rip. But then, how many CMEs did you take about mental health and self-care, and how many CMEs did you take about, reoxygenation of the heart, or just that, like things like that, like cardiology, like how much stuff was to learn there? So much stuff, but there's even more stuff to learn about self-care, and we should be pressing that too.
I don't even know necessarily if it would be something, even if it would even need to be something as extreme as taking like a CME or something, or including education. I'm sure that would help. Something as simple as CID after calls, the critical incident stress debriefing. After calls, they do it in the ERs. They do it at a lot of your bigger municipal agencies, where after a critical incident, a call that it did not go well, they'll do a debrief with all the crews that were present, with some managers, and occasionally they'll call in a specialist to do it at a station or whatever.
Right.
And I can tell you that In my entire career, with all the things that I did and saw, I got a critical incident stress debriefing twice.
I don't know if I've ever had one.
And once was after an incident that I did where it was a police shootout.
Mm-hmm.
And then one was after a particularly bad pediatric arrest.
Right.
And the second time it happened wasn't anything even official. It was just the supervisor at the station that you and I used to work at, gray-haired gentleman.
Oh, yeah.
Called all the units that had went to that call out of service and brought them back and gave them coffee and was like, all right, let's go over what just happened. But critical incident debriefings are huge in the fire service, and they're required in a lot of your police services. Any kind of use of force, any kind of, cardiac arrest, major car accident traumas. Your police departments and your fire departments are doing these critical incident stress debriefings.
And we're just not doing it.
And EMS just doesn't. We just go on to the next call.
Well, there's just and part of it is availability of crews, I guess. Can we really, can Company X really afford to take all these crews out of service for however long?
And then that you're 100% right that's their mentality. Mm-hmm. But what they need to start looking at it as, based on the three of us sitting here on this podcast right now, what they need to think of it as is, can we afford not to? Because realistically,
enrollment in EMT classes is down 50% compared to 2018 right now.
And most of your agencies can't staff the apparatus that they need
in order to cover the constituents that they have.
Because they have no retention, because these EMTs all burn out, all these paramedics burn out. There's no way to talk about the thing, because I'm sorry, I don't care what kind of brain you went into EMS with. There's not a single person I have ever met in this career field that wasn't some kind of fucked up after a real bad pediatric arrest.
I've never met anybody that walked out of it fine.
And something like that, there is no goddamn reason in the world why that company shouldn't be able to afford an hour for those two crews to get pulled off to go talk to somebody, because even if they're not having a problem with it, then that reinforces this fact that the resource is present for them.
Well, so we've been going out of here 90 minutes, and I love this. We're gonna do this again. I think the three of us are gonna get on again. If it becomes a thing and people want to listen to it, there's so much more here to unpack between the three of us, and we're gonna. But I hope that next time we do, we can all get in the same room and do it too. That'd be pretty good. But
fuck yeah, I'm down.
I guess I'm happy that both of you guys came on, and anything you guys want to plug or anything you guys final remarks.
I would just say that your system's as good as your people are at supporting each other. If you support your people in doing the good things, then everything's going to go well. And if you don't, then everything's going to go to shit.
Right.
And the only thing you have to blame for that is not taking care of your people. And that's really the core of this kind of job. It's paramilitary, it's paramedicine, and if you're not taking care of your people, you're not taking care of business. And that's the long and short of it.
So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I guess we'll just take care of yourself, take care of your brothers and sisters, and always reach out when you need help, man. Don't ever think about.
And I think if you keep this podcast running, I think that this might be a potentially very good resource for some people to realize that, hey, it ain't just you, brother.
Well, that's the beauty of it. You look at a 12-step program, and the reason why it works is it's not so much about doing the steps and stuff like that. Makes you a better person. But the reason why you stay sober through 12 steps is because you're hearing the people talk that are saying the same things that your head is thinking. And then, like, say I go to the next person, they're saying some things, and people just are listening and they're going, "Oh my god, I feel just like how that guy felt or that girl felt or whatever." And look, they're strong. They can do it. I could keep
Well,
doing it.
and it helps you keep in perspective too that me feeling this way is not a personal failing on my part necessarily.
It's okay not to be okay.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down
There are
to.
people who've done a lot more messed up stuff who feel just as bad as you do, stupid.
Right?
And their reason's just as good as yours.
There's always Pat. And then there's always Pat.
But I think what you're doing here is potentially a very good thing.
I hope so. I just hope people listen.
Putting some light on a real problem in the field.
I just hope people listen, and I hope it gets support, and I hope that people want to keep coming on too. I had, I think, no less than like 40 people reach out after I put that Facebook post up and say, "Hey, we're interested." And so, I mean, that's at least 40 episodes I got. Well, 42 because you guys are coming on multiple times. And that
You're asking a lot of us off the rip.
Is that old EMS voluntold coming
Rod, you guys just got mandated to the podcast.
Yeah, well, you go ahead and try there. I got next button right here.
Well, thanks for coming on, fellas. And yeah, we'll wrap it up there. All right. Hopefully you guys keep listening. I got people already lined up and ready to go. Some real interesting people that I worked with. One guy who hired me. So, yeah, right on. And like I said, it's okay not to be okay.